You can help support the channel by heading to our merchandise store and picking up some of our great aircraft designs created by our graphic designer. We have everything from fighters to transport aircraft, which you can choose to have printed on t-shirts, mugs, stickers and much more. Head to the description below and click the links and pick up your design today. Thank you and enjoy.
Domestic life in the Air Force is another subject entirely. Now I look back and I think I should have got the balance different. It's difficult. I spent a lot of time away from my family. I wished I hadn't. I did actually, I became magnanimous at the end. I knew I was going to go to Bosnia for 6 months. And a red flag deployment came up and I was nominated as the detachment liaison officer. I turned it down and gave it to somebody else because I thought I'm not going to go and spend a month in Las Vegas when I'm about to go to Bosnia. So yeah. It's not a good idea domestically.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a bit about culture show. What was it like coming, if you can talk a bit about the banter coming from the Harrier as well? You said you were welcome, but was it every day or did you just get on with it?
It was interesting for me in terms of flying, in that one of the things we had at that stage that it went out of fashion later with the aircraft changing over, but we used to have a summer camp for the air cadets where an air experience flight would send their Chipmunk aircraft and we would operate them for the summer, flying cadets. So I was able to renew my acquaintance with the Chipmunk. Chipmunk was the first thing I ever flew, and as I may have told you before, I was never an air cadet or anything. So when I started flying on the Chipmunk, a tail dragger, I found it enormously difficult. Well, really? 20 years later when I went back to it, what was the problem? I don't understand. But I was able to do that and have a bit of fun there. But also we had a search and rescue Wessex flight on the base, and I was able to fly with them quite a lot because coming from Harrier background, you do a Harrier leading course flying helicopters. Yep. I'd been based with helicopters quite a lot and I'd flown them quite a lot, so I was able to go and fly with the yellow helicopters, the Wessex.
Lovely.
We did have one slightly amusing incident where there was me, Wing Commander OC Ops, in the left-hand seat, a flying officer flying the aircraft in the right-hand seat, and the flight at that time had a squadron leader rear crew person in charge of it, and he was down the back and he was going to go on the cable. So we went out to this RAF Marine craft out over the North Sea and approached the boat, put the squadron leader on the winch, put him down onto the deck, and at that point it seemed the aircraft was drifting slightly to the right, and the man operating the cable was warning about this, saying, you know, don't go any further, I'm losing sight. And the pilot then was losing sight, and he asked me, can you see it? No, I can't, I'm on the wrong side here. And at that point the chap on the top of the cable fired the guillotine and cut the cable. So now there's a very irate squadron leader on the deck of this little boat, a very worried flying officer flying this airplane, and we're at least half an hour from coal to shore, and he'd have to get the spare aeroplane readied and get back out. So it's going to take an hour and a half at least between putting the flight commander down and getting him back again. So it could be an interesting conversation, so I left him to do that. But I had some good times with them. It's good fun going and hovering over. And I didn't realise there's this maritime thing. They have a common frequency, and they could just call up on this common frequency any boat they saw, go and get its name and call them up and say, can we come and do some winching on your deck? Invariably they'd say yes. So it was quite a good fun time doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So what squadrons did you actually fly on the Jag?
I flew with 6, 41 and 54, all three of them, differing amounts. I did the Italy detachments I did with 41 and 54. 41, I think it was probably the last sortie I did out in over Bosnia. was a recce sortie, and at that stage we'd got a different pod. Again, it was something of a Harrier hangover. It was a pod that was basically developed for Northern Ireland, for looking at what terrorists were doing a long distance away. It's called the Lorop pod, which had a long telephoto lens, and the task we were given on one particular day was to go and fly a big package, and it was a Jaguar to use this Lorop pod to look at a suspected SAM site, and it was a time when an F-16 had just been shot down. We were supposed to go and look for where this site was, and then there were 2 more Jaguars flying an escort on this one that was doing the recce, and there was suppression of air defence around, there were fighters, there was a command and control aircraft, a whole big package of stuff. But we got airborne, and the leader, his aircraft went US. So I moved into the lead. In this slightly unusual situation, and I say we were flying medium level, and I can't remember what height we were, probably at about 20,000 feet. And there was this suspected SAM site, and there was cloud, thick cloud, all the way up to about 15 or 16,000 feet.
Wow.
So if a surface-to-air missile was fired, there'd be not very much time between it came out of the cloud and it hit us. So as we approached the target, I took the decision, which I wouldn't have done in my more junior days, to say, no, I've been tasked with taking photographs of this. There are no photographs to be had. I'm going to go round it. Now, nobody ever said anything, but I wonder whether there was actually another mission was, let's see if they shoot at the Jaguars. I wasn't willing to take that risk.
Yeah.
So we went off home and didn't take any photos that day.
Yeah. So at Coltishall, did all the squadrons mix as one, or were they separate, like on base?
Very separate. I mean, 6 had its own hangar. 41 and 54 were in the same hangar, but discrete units. It made a difference that 41 and 54 shared an aircrew feeder. Silly, trivial thing, but it meant that people did mix more. 6 tended to be a bit more go it alone in their own hangar down the other end. I got in the difficult position where I was in charge of the wing overall, and because of the operations in particular, and oddly, given how many Jaguars there used to be, there weren't that many, and there weren't enough. And I had to tell the squadrons how many aircraft they were going to have and which ones. And they really didn't like that. They really resented this stranger being in the middle doing that sort of thing. But,
yeah. So I have to ask, what was like an average day like on a JAG squadron? Obviously you were OC Ops, but was it different from you from like let's say a general JAG pilot on the squadron?
Yeah, I mean their day would be the standard, I guess what used to be the standard squadron day, because we were basically day operations. I hesitate there because we did start doing quite a bit of work with night vision goggles while I was there, so things were moving towards the night stuff. However, we would normally start with a brief at 7:30 or 8 in the morning, where the whole squadron would be briefed on what's going on with the weather, what the intelligence situation is, what is the general plan for the day. There would be a designated duty authorising officer who would run the programme. The programme would be set out the day before so that people could prepare themselves ready to go. There would probably be 3 waves of aircraft roughly per day. It was staggered, so it ended up being a continuous flow. However, it would start off with a first takeoff probably at 8:30, 9 o'clock, and work through the day. And generally things would wind up before sunset. We did do night flying. We had to keep current in night flying, but we didn't do a lot of operations at night. And I flew with the night vision goggles in the Jaguar. And
What was that like?
Very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Scary stuff, really. Not advisable, really, with the technology we had then. I was quite pleased and felt vindicated at one stage. I had 3 different station commanders while I was at Coltishall.
Really?
The first one was a real old Jaguar character from the early days, and he did things like he had his own radio slot on Radio Norwich, and every day he would give his review of the newspapers. Lovely guy. Second one was more of an ambitious bloke, and he debated with me the amount of time I was flying aeroplanes not behind a desk, and he felt I should be devoting more time to that. I was quite pleased when our Air Officer Commanding AOC 1 Group came out with an edict saying that the executives at his stations were not flying enough and they needed to fly more. Thank you very much, I will do that. And then the third station commander that came along was actually somebody who'd been OC 54 at the beginning of my tour, so it was a known character. Then towards the end of the tour I went into this dialogue again about where I was going next, and it was a friend of mine who was in charge of my posting, and I discussed with him my choice of buying a house, where to go in reach of stations I knew. So I spent 3 years weekly commuting to Norfolk, and I would really like something closer to home. And he eventually, after various jobs have been discussed, he said, well, there is one. It's not a career job. It won't get you anywhere, but it's comfortable. You can fly as much as you want. It's instructional stuff, which you've done before, and it's at Cramwell, which is 20 minutes drive from your house. How would you like that? I had to think about it and said, yes, I would like that. And he actually ended the phone call with, right, you can go there as soon as you get back from Sarajevo, click. Oh, damn. So off I went to this wrecked country that I've been looking at, and there I was on the ground, seeing it all firsthand.
Yeah, what was that like then, being on the ground?
It was just wild, the whole place. Yeah, you'd seen the Winter Olympics, Torval and Dean, lovely civilised country and all the skiing and everything. It was tribal warfare when I got there. I had to get in via Croatia. I got an RAF Hercules as far as Croatia, then got in a French Puma that went across the mountains, stopping for fuel halfway up one of the mountains, got me into the city, got picked up in a Land Rover that had a bullet hole in the windscreen, and it was just constant gunfire all the time. There were people shooting guns for no particular reason usually. Because I was a senior officer, I got a room with only 4 of us in there in bunk beds, and I got a top bunk, which as the newcomer I was given the top bunk, which had a nice neat line of bullet holes in the wall just above it, because we were on the 2nd floor of this building, which had the Bosnian secret service down in the basement, which was a bit crazy. But they had put sandbags in front of the window, but they'd left about 6 inches at the top, so they'd get a bit of air if it was needed. And somebody got some bullets through there somehow. So it was just a crazy place. Yeah. And it just carried it. At the time, this was 1995, before the Dayton Agreement was signed, and there was just all hell let loose all the time, and yeah, I was not sorry to leave there, but there were things like, it began to open up, and the first C-17 landed at Sarajevo Airport. Wow. And because it's a C-17, it did what it could do, and it landed at the threshold, slowed right down. Nobody came out to greet it, because no, we're not going out there. That's dangerous country. You need to land fairly fast, get to the middle, turn off, and get behind the sandbags as soon as you can. Yeah. And then after the agreement, I was United Nations with the Blue Beret, and I had a multinational staff of 10, well, 9 plus me, 10 of us all together. Yeah. NATO came in with 100 men with a 1-star general in charge. Oh, wow. Didn't fit into the same space. You can't fit in those 4 beds, that's no good. So they had to look for alternative accommodation. And they didn't understand for a start why their mobile phones wouldn't work. Well, yeah, we bombed all that. That's all gone. We wrecked it. And then on the morning of the handover, we'd given deadlines to the warring factions saying you must do things by certain times. And one of them was you've got to switch off all the threat radars. And there's this general leaning over my shoulder as I'm asking the Spanish guy to ring up the combatants in one area and say, can you just turn off that radar? It's worrying our aircraft over the top when you keep switching it onto tracking mode. And the general said, don't warn them, drop a bomb on them. That's the way to do it. I said, sir, can you just look at on the map where it is? I said, that's our side. Have they invaded? No, that's the ones we think of as being the friendly ones. They're doing it as well. There were 3 sides in this war, and they were all bad guys, basically.
Really? Wow, that's crazy. But yeah, so Bob, how would you sum up the Jaguar, and did you enjoy your time flying it?
Jaguar was a lovely aeroplane. I enjoyed flying it. Great job. It was emphasised to me after I'd finished at Coltishall. Went to Sarajevo. I just got back from Sarajevo when the Air Force found me and hauled me back to Coltishall to preside over a board of inquiry. And this is, I did 2 boards of inquiry in 2 years. This one I was called in because it was a fatal one at Coltishall itself. And I was able to make a recommendation at the end of this aircraft might not have crashed if it had had more power. Get bigger engines. There are bigger engines available. And the next year I did a board of inquiry into a GR7 crash. And again I was able to say, this aircraft might not have crashed had it had more power. There is a bigger engine available. Get the bigger engine.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Solution to a lot of fighter pilots' needs is specific excess power.
Exactly. But we got some random questions from a couple of our viewers, if you're happy to answer these, Bob. On your time on the Jag, was there spotters at Coltishall outside the gates?
Yeah, they were there all the time. They were interesting. I used to take my luxury OC Ops Wings Mini and drive around to the perimeter and go and talk to these people.
Oh wow!
And they were fascinating, and it became more fascinating on that board of inquiry. The aircraft crashed just at the end of the runway, and there were a lot of spotters there, and fortunately didn't hit any of them. But one of the witnesses that we called in, there was a spotter and there was his wife, and the wife gave evidence, and she was sitting in the car reading, and he called out, "Whoa, look at this!" and she looked up and she described what she saw. She said there was an aircraft, and in front of it there was this sort of like vertical blinds in the kitchen. That's the barrier. And she said then it hit the ground and something came flying out of the top of it, and a metal thing landed really near to me, and it was a black square-shaped thing, sort of the size of an under-the-counter fridge, going back to the kitchen again. That was the ejection seat. And she described the whole thing in domestic terms, but very accurately.
So that helped a lot then, I'm guessing.
Yeah, nowadays spotters would have film of everything that was going on, as they did with the Coningsby accident last year. But
yeah, absolutely.
Then we didn't have such luxury.
No, absolutely. What's the fastest you've been in a Jaguar?
Fastest? Well, we used to take it up to about Mach 1.1 on an air test, just to check it's the transonic handling that you're interested in, see it's all straight. Yeah, that's probably the fastest, but normally we would not be going to those extremes because we'd have tanks on the outside.
If you could have one last trip in either a Jaguar or Harrier, which would it be?
Harrier, I'm afraid.
There you go. And can we see any more books in the future from yourself?
I've got nothing in the pipeline at the moment. I have an open invitation to write a general biography, but haven't got round to that yet.
Yeah. Do you get to any Jaguar reunions?
I haven't been, no. There haven't been any general Jaguar reunions for a while now, There's the regular one is the Gulf War reunion, which I wasn't involved in. No, that does remind me of another anecdote, if you'll excuse my straying
Yeah,
again.
go for it.
There was a remarkable hero from the first Gulf War, was a flying officer flying a Jaguar, got a DFC, which was unusual in the 90s. He was at Colchester still as a flying officer when I was there, and he was leading a formation going to drop 1,000-pound high explosive bombs on Garvey Island up in Scotland, and the weather was rubbish, and the number 2 saw an island, bombed it, wrong island.
Oh no.
But fortunately not an inhabited island, dropped it on this rock, but that caused a bit of a stir. Now there was a request came in at the same time. I spent a few months as the station commander at Colchester because my station commander went out to be a detachment commander in Italy. So I was the station commander. This request had come in about this flying officer. So I summoned him to my office, and he's a bit worried about this. I said, well, you know, there was that incident with the bomb and Scotland and things. Well, I've had a request from the Director of Airspace Policy down in London, and he basically wants to see you hung. And there's a draining of colour. So, yeah, he's also the man in charge of portraits at College Hall in Cranwell, and he wants to have a portrait painted of you as the flying officer hero to go and join them on the wall. But it was worth it just for those few seconds of face draining.
Yeah, absolutely. But finally, where can we find your books online, Bob?
Well, there's the well-known South American River. They normally are a good starting point. W.H. Smith's sometimes have things. It's getting complicated now. The Harrier Boys Volume 1 is in at least 4 different versions now. There's the original, there's the paperback, there's now a magazine format, and there's the online edition. So you have to search around a bit. I think the originals are becoming a bit rare, and I don't know if he plans to do a reprint anytime soon.
Great stuff. Well, Bob, thank you very much for coming on the show.
You're very welcome.